Coalcliff, just south of Sydney, is quite unique. It is both the birthplace of coal in Australia and a true paradise, where for 100 years its lucky residents found good, rewarding work at Coalcliff Colliery and the Illawarra Coke Works, and a great place to live. Coal mining and coke manufacture has now ceased in this new century, and the residents of Coalcliff today enjoy an absolutely unspoilt paradise. With magnificent Coalcliff Beach, activity for the children in Leader Park, and close by the magnificent rock pool where all the village children learn to swim, and where the family lived in beautiful surroundings, and with that marvellous view looking north to Sydney, and fast road and rail access to both the city and to Wollongong. Paradise indeed, for everyone.
G'day, how you going? It's 7 minutes away from 9 on 97.3 ABC Illawarra, alongside these sad job losses at the paper mill, which of course are subject to such international pressures. The same could be said for the Illawarra Coke Works, which have closed, for production at least, ceased production of coke as of just yesterday, after over 100 years in the business. You might have heard yesterday on AM a couple of quotes from a film that was shot back in the 60s called Illawarra Coke. It's on YouTube. You can have a look at it if you like. I got to look at the whole thing yesterday. It's a sensational piece of work. It was shot by Noel Leader. Now, he was the manager of the Coke Works, but he was also a keen amateur photographer and filmmaker. And he bought himself a film camera from Switzerland and got recordings done, etc. And it's just fantastic. So I'd highly recommend you have a look at it. There's also a couple of pieces where he talks about the making of that film. He's 89 years old, and I caught up with him from his home in Mossman this morning to have a bit of a chat to him. And it was just great. So we've got this couple of segments of interview to play you just after 9:30 when we talk with Noel Leader. You might not know, I certainly didn't, that Leader Park up in Coalcliff is named after him, and he talks about the making of that park with a whole lot of material from the Coke Works and from the colliery. Here's a little bit from the film.
My name is Noel Leader. I am works manager of the Illawarra Coke Company at Coalcliff. I am also a keen amateur movie maker and have made this film to show the important part played by Illawarra Coke in the development of Australian secondary industry and also in export markets in Southeast Asia.
That's the beginning of the film with Noel talking straight to camera, and it talks about the whole process, and it's awesome. It's fantastic. And I do want to play you the finale, which I really enjoyed as well, particularly for the swelling music.
Hard coking coal mined at the Coalcliff Colliery has an established market in Southeast Asia. The quality and consistency of Illawarra coke are also being recognised and appreciated by progressive foundry operators in this area. A short haul to Port Kembla, and Illawarra coke is on its way to foundries in other countries. A product of Australia, helping to build trade and goodwill with Australia's neighbours.
That's classic of its type, isn't it? That's the finale of Illawarra Coke, and you'll hear from its maker and the ex-manager of the Illawarra Coke Works, Noel Leader, after 9:30. But right now I want to introduce you to Noel Leader. You heard a little bit of a quote from his film, which he made in the 60s about Illawarra Coke. He's still a pretty bright bloke at 89 years old, living in Mossman. And I caught up with him this morning to talk about those years when Illawarra Coke turned into what he thought was the place producing the best industrial coke in the world. And I started by asking him a little bit about what got him into the business.
In life, one has to have a bit of luck on one side, and I guess I did, because at the end of the war, Australia was in big trouble in terms of the rundown of the economy during the war years, and the coal industry was in particular strife because equipment and also search for new sources of coal had run down badly. So I was a geologist and had the wonderful opportunity of being involved in the Joint Coal Board, which was the joint body constructed by state and government, state and federal government, to find new coal and get it quickly. So I was wandering the hills and hollows of the coal fields of New South Wales looking for new coal, and that happened fairly quickly. But we had to also take a direction which was vital. I'm not denigrating the communist people who were then running the coal industry, because that was the mantra which was then pervading the whole industry. But they were slowing down the production of coal and therefore slowing down the development of industry after the war by restricting the supply of coal. So the key to finding new supplies of coal was to find local cut coal which could be won easily by simply scraping away the soil on top of it, and then the seam below would be mined using the wonderful new equipment that the Americans had developed to fight the war and had abandoned in huge numbers around the islands of the Pacific, which were then being brought back to Australia and put to use in industry. So suddenly we had...
What was this war equipment that was adjusted to use for coal mining?
Well, huge bulldozers against the little ones we used to have, and huge mechanical skipping bucket shovels, which therefore allowed us to break up the coal quickly and put it on coal trucks, on rail trucks rather, and get it quickly to where it was needed in the power plants. So the initial big developments were in the Hunter Valley, where the first Avon Cut was constructed at Ravensworth near Muswellbrook. The soil on top was scooped off, dumped in heaps along the road, and it's still there. In fact, it's a little sort of mountain in Ravensworth alongside the main road to Muswellbrook. Behind that mountain is the hollow that was left after we dug out the coal, and it became a little lake, of course, when it filled up with water later. And Lake Liddell, close by, which is the remains of an old open-cut coal pit, is the source of water cooling for the Liddell power station at Muswellbrook. Anybody who drives past there, I'm sure, would remember the clouds of steam rising from the cooling towers of the Liddell power station. Mm. And that, of course, is sitting on the side of the first or the second Avon Cut. The first one was Ravensworth, the second one was Liddell.
What about where you were at Coalcliff? What was your role in sort of setting that up?
That was after the initial discovery bit. Once the coal was found, I was headhunted to take on the job as works manager of the Illawarra Coke Company, because we needed the coke quickly to supply coke to industry like General Motors, Holden, to make motor cars, and International Harvester in Melbourne to make harvesting equipment for farmers, and also trucks, Ford, and ultimately other manufacturers. So my job, therefore, was to quickly lick into shape some rather run-down coke ovens, and to make them more productive, we redesigned them to a large extent and made them bigger and most efficient. In fact, they're the largest coke oven design in the world.
Yeah, at the time when it was running at full capacity, how significant was it on the world stage, the Illawarra Coke facility?
Well, we've got to be realistic. We're a small producer in terms of the world, but it was significant because it was probably the strongest and best metallurgical coke made anywhere in the world, and that was pure luck because we had the wonderful bellow seam coal mined at Coalcliff Colliery right next door.
Was it all down to the raw material, or was there something about the design of the coke works that made the quality of the coke so high?
A two-way street. We're lucky with the coal.
but we did a lot to improve the quality of the coke by very careful grinding to the right size, a mix to fuse into the ideal coke, and we made some smart discoveries of adding a few additives to the coal to help it make better coke. The key, of course, to this was that this coke was, our major customer then was the Broken Hill Associated Smelters at Port Perry in South Australia, which was where all the ore from the wonderful rich mines at Broken Hill was smelted, including gold and silver, but the big product then was lead. Of course, they were lead ore mines, really. And the big smelter at Port Perry was the largest producer in the world of lead, and still is. It had a huge furnace to reduce the ore to the basic lead, and this furnace needed special qualities in the coke to be able to carry the huge burdens that descended down the shaft of the furnace. We had to make the biggest and strongest coke to carry that burden. So we were sending regular ships on a 4-day ship actually, to Port Perry from Port Kembla to supply the fuel for this huge smelter.
Looking at the film, the process of making coke is just awe-inspiring, and the size of the equipment, but also the enormous amount of incredibly hot material being handled. Was it dangerous?
Well, I've got to be realistic. We probably were a little bit cavalier about it in those days. Today, everybody would be wearing far more protective gear than we were then. But the nature of the coke worker, who I have tremendous respect for, was that they were doing a job. They were used to doing it. They wanted to do it their way. They didn't want to wear sort of clumsy clothing, which made life harder. They were wonderful people, and I'm just so sad to think that so many of them who've given their working life to making coke in the Wollongong area have now reached the end of their working life because, coke was their life and it's no longer there. That's
Noel Leader, the ex-manager of Illawarra Coke and an amateur filmmaker who documented the early years of that revolutionary plant that they had in Coalcliff back in the 60s. You can see that on YouTube if you search for Illawarra Coke. In the second part of our interview, I started by asking Noel about this longevity of workers. We've heard that there are people who've got great-grandfathers who worked in the plant that have been working right up until this week, and I wondered what it was that about the business that had got into the blood.
Well, it's a tradition, and they were great people. I much admire Rex Wright from, who's told you a lot of the story, because he kept the caking tradition alive and produced a very successful industry until, of course, the market collapsed. But the people themselves were very, very, very different people. They had it in their blood, I think, as you were alluding earlier. Every child of a coke worker wanted to be a coke worker. It was quite unique.
Why do you think that is? Are they different people to coal miners or people who work in a steel foundry?
Yes, the simple answer has to be yes. Although I think steel foundry people probably are closely aligned in their concept of how the working life is. They were unique people. They were proud of what they did, very proud. And while it was hot as could be and dirty, dusty, lots of nasties went with it, they were proud because they were coke workers and they were doing it well and making the best coke, and they were proud to see the truckloads of coke roll by on the railway on its way to export overseas, even not only to say Port Perry, we're sending it all around the Pacific region, and later, of course, to the US and to Europe.
Now, Noel, I wouldn't know so much about the making of coke if it wasn't for your film that you shot called Illawarra Coke. At the same time as you're a geologist and a manager, you're a keen filmmaker. What sort of equipment were you using back then to make the film?
Well, I started off with fairly humble gear because it was pretty expensive. But I eventually bit the bullet and bought a Payard Bolex 16mm camera, which of course was the epitome of the best production of that sort of equipment in those days.
Well, it's a fine equipment. Was that the wind-up camera that you would use? Beautiful clockwork mechanism?
It sure was. Made in Switzerland with Swiss precision, like a Swiss watch. It was really first class. But the key, of course, was to have the right film behind in the camera to capture it. And I had to experiment then because I used Eastman colour, which was quite unique film in those days, and it had its own problems of fading and exposure control and things like that. But the end result was good, and the film hit the spot. I set out with it to show the importance of Coalcliff coal and Illawarra coke to the development of Australian secondary industry. And I think I achieved my objective. It was shown all around the world and got very high accolades, and more importantly, it made the world aware of Illawarra coke and Coalcliff coal to expand their export markets overseas rapidly. It was very successful in that sense.
Did your workers get used to the boss having a camera with him all the time? Were they suspicious that you were trying to keep an eye on them?
Look, I know what you're saying. They were the most loyal people one could ever want as a boss. They were wonderful. They were proud of what they were doing. They weren't suspicious of me because I'd earned their trust, and they knew I was working in their best interest to promote the success of the company and therefore the longevity of their jobs. And it's just so sad now that these wonderful people no longer have these coking jobs and the skills that went with them, because they were very skilled in their own, especially in their jobs.
Well, we've seen the world price, fluctuate, and we've seen other countries come up in coal production, coke production, steel production, etc. Are we forever to lose those skills in Australia now, do you think?
I hate to say yes, but I think we've got to face the facts, because whether we like it or not, we're a high-cost country in a low-cost part of the world. And Asia, who does not have the quality of coal that we've got, is now the source of almost everything we buy, as you would well know. We make very few things in Australia now, and it's just so sad that is the case. But it's a simple matter of economics. We're too expensive, and everything we use today, as you full well know, is cheaper than the things we used to make ourselves. And I can't see that changing.
So we're still going to be sending Coalcliff coal across and Newcastle coal across to Asia, but it'll be sent back to us either as cars or as coke for us to try and make stuff out of it, I suppose.
Unbelievable. I didn't ever think we'd have coke sent back from overseas, but I believe that has happened as trial shipments. And that's not a regular situation so far, but I fear it may well be, because the closure of these coke ovens means that if there were any foundries still operating in Australia, they wouldn't have any fuel to operate. They'd have to get it from somewhere else. Very sad. And
do you ever get a chance to drive down perhaps the new Seacliff Bridge and past Coalcliff?
Not for a long time. As I said earlier, I'm 89 and I still got a licence, but I don't drive as much as I used to. But I'm very proud to have a park at Coalcliff called Leader Park.
And that's you, Noel?
That's me, yep. I was involved in the construction of the park because we had a landslip problem in the village of Coalcliff itself, which really was the same as the landslip on Lawrence Hargrave Dive, which caused the need to build the new wonderful Seacliff Bridge. So I arrived at the concept through my geology background that we should seek the source of the water which causes all these landslides and pipe it into the ocean. So we dug into several blocks of land in Coalcliff which were slowly sliding into the ocean. Even the main road, Patson Road, was affected by it. And having dug down, I found the source of all the water was making this stuff so fluid and slumping into the sea. We then piped at the ocean, as I said, and covered it with 3,000 tonnes of hard rock, which came out of Coalcliff Quarry, which was then mining its way through a fault, the coal seam. And left it there for a couple of years to stabilise, then covered it with about 1,000 tonnes or so of topsoil, grassed it, put in swings and playground equipment for the local kids, and seats for the parents to look at this wonderful ocean beyond the park and the rock pool down below, which is wonderful.
Well, I hope next time a family has a picnic at Leader Park, they can raise a glass of ginger beer for you, Noel?
Well, believe it or not, the locals had a 50-year celebration of the opening of Leader Park only a few months back. And the Coalcliff people contacted me and told me they're having a great party, enjoying the park that had been built 50 years earlier. It was a lovely tribute to have them call me and tell me that they tasted my health. not for ginger beer.
Well, they're way ahead of me. Noel, it's been a pleasure talking to you today, and thanks very much for coming on our program this morning.
It's been great to talk with you, and I hope all those wonderful coke workers are proud of what they did, because they should be.
The manager back in the 60s of who works at Coalcliff, the Illawarra Coke Company, Noel Leader, talking to me from his home in Sydney this morning.
I would like to thank the Progress Association for giving me the distinct honour and privilege of opening this park, and adding my congratulations with the previous speakers to those who have done so much for this little area here. I feel that over the last few years that many millions of pounds have been expended in the industry here, and in its wake we've seen a revolution here in housing and amenities that are required in any modern up-to-date town. And the company must take its full share of the credit for what they've done here. There's nothing better, I feel, than possibly introducing some particular civic project into the minds of these leaders of industry, because they have resources, I suppose, even much more than the poor state government that Mr. Jackson represents and the poor old city council that I represent. But when we all get together, it's amazing to see just what transformation can take place. And what's better than to have a park of this sort? I would like to add just a few words of congratulations to Mr. Leader, and say that it's people like Noel Leader that gives people like me some inspiration to do a public job, because here you find a man that's interested in the welfare of the people that depend on his company for their living, and they have to work with them, they have to live with them. And I only ask you and some of the older residents that are here this afternoon to have a look and see what's happened in Coalcliff over the last few years. And I think that you too must be proud. I am, as Mayor of the city, very proud of what's taken place. And there's people like Noel Leader that has set the standard and set the pace for us to come along and follow. So it's quite fitting that this little park should be named after Noel Leader. And might I say, Noel, that we in public life have possibly streets or parks or something else named after us, but that's about your only compensation for the many hours and weeks and months and years of work, is that somebody possibly shows some appreciation for the effort that you've put into it. And this is your payoff today. The park is to be named Leader Park, and it will always be named Leader Park. It will always remain a park. And long after both you and I are gone, the children of tomorrow will still be enjoying this lovely little area here.
The description "paradise found" is just right for the magnificent secluded village of Coalcliff today, where its lucky residents enjoy the superb beach, the beautiful pool, the park, the great community hall, serenity, and fast rail transport to city and Wollongong. Paradise indeed. Long may it be so. Should anyone want to look at my film Illawarra Coke in full, with an excellent descriptive soundtrack, please just enter the name Illawarra Coke when searching my website in YouTube, one space followed by NLEEDER. I think you would enjoy it, but it's bye for now.